Beneath the soil, in perfect darkness, millions of tiny creatures are counting the years. They have no calendars, no clocks, no sunlight to guide them. And yet, somewhere within their pale, patient bodies, a count is being kept with breathtaking precision. For 17 long years, they sip the thin sweetness of tree roots and wait. They are cicadas, and they are dreaming the slowest dream in the animal kingdom. Tonight, we will descend with them into that quiet earth, and we will ask the question that has puzzled biologists for generations. How does a creature, buried alive, know when 17 years have passed? Welcome to Let's Learn While You Sleep. Tonight, we journey into one of the most extraordinary acts of patience in all of nature, the 17-year sleep of the periodical cicada. Imagine for a moment a creature whose entire childhood is spent in absolute darkness, suspended in a kind of biological meditation, waiting for a single, glorious season above the soil. These insects, which belong to the genus Magicicada, are found only in the eastern United States, and they have been performing this strange, synchronized vanishing act for at least the last several million years. As you settle into the quiet of your room, let your breath grow slow and even. There is no need to follow every detail. Let the words drift over you the way warm rain drifts over a summer forest. We are going to explore the science of waiting, the mathematics of survival, and the soft mystery of creatures who measure time not in days, but in decades. So close your eyes and let us begin. To understand the periodical cicada, we must first understand what makes it different from its more familiar cousins. Across the world, there are roughly 3,000 known species of cicadas, and most of them follow a fairly ordinary schedule. They emerge every year, or every 2 or 3 years, in numbers spread quietly across the seasons. But in the deciduous forests of the eastern United States, something far stranger occurs. Here, in the warm, wet soils of states like Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and the rolling lands of the Appalachian foothills, there live 7 recognized species of periodical cicadas, 3 with 17-year life cycles, and 4 with 13-year cycles. These are the only known insects on Earth that spend such enormous spans of time underground in such perfect synchrony. Consider what that means. A nymph that hatches in the spring of 1 year will not see the sun again until nearly 2 decades have passed. It will live through human elections, technological revolutions, the births of children, the falling of countless autumn leaves, all while curled silently around a root somewhere in the dark. And then, when the appointed year arrives, it will emerge, not alone, but with millions, sometimes billions, of its brothers and sisters, all rising from the soil within a few short weeks of one another. Scientists call these enormous emergences broods, and each brood is identified by a Roman numeral. Brood X, one of the largest, emerged most recently in 2021 across 15 states. Brood 19 and Brood 13 shared a rare co-emergence in 2024, an event that had not occurred since 1803, when Thomas Jefferson was president. The sheer scale of these events is difficult to imagine. In a single acre of forest, more than 1 million cicadas may climb out of the earth in a matter of nights, their pale, soft bodies clinging to bark, tree trunks, fence posts, anything that will hold them, while they wait for their wings to harden and their long underground silence to finally break. How, you may wonder, does a small insect with a brain no larger than a grain of sand keep track of 17 passing years? This is one of the most fascinating open questions in entomology, and the answer, as far as we currently understand it, is both elegant and beautifully strange. Periodical cicadas spend their long subterranean lives feeding on xylem fluid, the thin watery sap that flows upward through the roots of deciduous trees. This fluid is nutritionally poor, which partly explains why their development is so slow, but it also contains subtle seasonal signatures. As trees go through their yearly cycle of dormancy in winter and active growth in spring, the chemistry of their xylem fluid changes. The concentrations of certain amino acids and plant hormones rise and fall in predictable rhythms. Researchers, including a notable 2000 study by Carban, Black, and Weinbaum, have proposed that cicadas can detect these annual shifts and use them as a kind of internal calendar. In their experiments, scientists artificially shortened the seasonal cycles of peach trees that hosted developing cicada nymphs. The cicadas, remarkably, emerged a year earlier than expected. This suggested that the insects were indeed counting tree cycles rather than measuring time directly. They were, in a sense, listening through their mouths to the slow heartbeat of the forest above them. Yet even this elegant explanation leaves much unexplained. How does the cicada distinguish year 17 from year 16 or year 18? How does it integrate 17 distinct seasonal pulses without confusion? Scientists believe there must be additional internal mechanisms, perhaps molecular counters within the cicada's cells, perhaps developmental thresholds that can only be crossed after a precise number of growth stages have been completed. The truth is, we do not yet fully know. Somewhere inside that small, pale body, in a way we have not yet decoded, an insect is keeping time more reliably than many human clocks. And it does this in absolute darkness, with no calendar, no companions, and no instruction other than the slow seasonal sighing of a tree it cannot see. Now consider the deeper mystery, not just how the cicada counts, but why it counts to 17, or to 13. Why these particular numbers, and not, say, 15 or 20, or any other span of time? The answer, as far as evolutionary biologists can tell, is one of the most beautiful examples of mathematics written into the body of a living creature. 13 and 17 are prime numbers, numbers divisible only by themselves and by 1. And this, scientists believe, is no accident. Imagine a forest filled with predators, birds, small mammals, parasitic wasps, fungi, many of which have their own population cycles. Some predators boom every 2 years, others every 3, others every 4 or 5. If cicadas emerged every 12 years, they would coincide with predators on 2-year cycles, 3-year cycles, 4-year cycles, and 6-year cycles, again and again. They would be caught in a recurring trap of overlap, but by emerging on prime number intervals, cicadas drastically reduce these coincidences. A 17-year cicada and a 5-year predator will only sync up once every 85 years. A 13-year cicada and a 3-year predator only every 39 years. By choosing prime numbers, evolution has, over millions of years, sculpted a survival strategy that exploits a quirk of arithmetic. This is sometimes called the predator satiation hypothesis. When cicadas finally emerge, they appear in such overwhelming numbers that predators simply cannot eat them all. A robin, a raccoon, a squirrel. None of these animals can possibly consume enough cicadas to make a dent in the population. The insects survive by sheer abundance, and the prime number cycle ensures that no predator can specialize in eating them, because no predator can reliably predict their return. It is an astonishing strategy. A creature without language, without consciousness as we understand it, without any awareness of mathematics, has, through the slow, patient work of natural selection, encoded prime numbers into the very rhythm of its life. Somewhere in the deep logic of biology, evolution has discovered number theory. Let us now picture, in slow and gentle detail, what actually happens in the year of the Great Awakening. It begins quietly, in late spring, when the soil at a depth of about 8 inches reaches a temperature of approximately 64 degrees Fahrenheit, or roughly 18 degrees Celsius. This temperature threshold appears to be the final signal, the soft chemical chime that tells the waiting nymphs that the world above is warm enough, the trees are leafed, and the time has come. Across millions of acres, in a span of just a few weeks, the cicadas begin to dig. They tunnel upward through the dark earth they have known their entire lives, and one by one they break through the surface, often at night, when the cooler air offers some protection from predators. If you were to walk through a forest on such an evening, you might hear it, a soft rustling, like distant rain, as countless small bodies push aside leaves and twigs. They climb. They find the nearest vertical surface, a tree trunk, a tall blade of grass, the wooden post of a garden fence, and they grip it tightly with their small clawed legs. Then they do something extraordinary. Their outer shell, the exoskeleton that has held them through 17 years of growth, begins to split along the back. Slowly, very slowly, the soft, pale adult cicada emerges from the husk of its former self. Its wings, at first crumpled and damp, slowly unfold and harden in the night air. Within a few hours, the pale ghost-like creature darkens into the familiar, black-bodied, red-eyed adult cicada that the eastern forests have come to know. Behind it, clinging to bark and grass and stone, are the empty translucent shells, millions upon millions of them, like a vast quiet army of glass figurines left behind by a vanished civilization. And the cicada, after 17 years of silence, is finally, at last, ready to live its brief life in the light. So, beneath the quiet weight of soil and root, the cicada nymph waits. It does not sleep exactly in the way a mammal sleeps, with its dreams and its rhythms of deep and shallow rest. Instead, it enters a slowed existence, a metabolism turned down to the faintest whisper, a heartbeat measured not in seconds but in seasons. Around it, the world above performs its long, slow theatre. Snow falls and melts. Roots thicken and branch deeper into the earth. Generations of squirrels, of robins, of foxes are born and die in the leaf litter overhead, and the cicada notices none of it directly. And yet, in some quiet biochemical way, it knows. It tastes time through the sap. Scientists believe that the nymph's primary clue to the passage of years comes through chemical signals carried in the xylem fluid of the tree roots upon which it feeds. The subtle annual shifts in sugars and amino acids that mark each spring's awakening of the host plant above. Each pulse of new growth is, in effect, a single tick of a clock that ticks only once a year. Consider for a moment what this means. A creature counts time not by seeing the sun, not by feeling the temperature, not by sensing the moon, but by sipping, slowly, the rising tide of life within a tree's veins. 17 of those sips. 17 springs detected through the faint sweetness of root sap. And then, only then, when the count has been completed, does the inner machinery shift, the genes whisper their long-awaited instructions, and the nymph begin to prepare for its return to the surface. There is something profoundly humbling in this. The cicada has never seen sunlight. It has never known the shape of leaves, the color of sky, the texture of bark beneath its claws. And yet, somehow, encoded in its tiny body, is the patience to wait nearly 2 decades for one brief glimpse of all of it. It is, in a sense, the longest held breath in the animal kingdom, a breath held in darkness, a breath waiting for spring. When at last the 17th spring arrives, something extraordinary begins to stir beneath the forest floor. The signal is subtle at first, a chemical permission slip, granted by the warming soil, by the tree's renewed pulse of life, by the cicada's own internal calendar reaching its long-awaited final page. Researchers have found that the nymphs begin to ascend only when the soil temperature, measured roughly 8 inches below the surface, reaches approximately 64 degrees Fahrenheit or 18 degrees Celsius. Not a degree warmer, not a degree cooler. The species has tuned itself across deep evolutionary time to this precise threshold. And then, in a coordinated emergence that may involve hundreds of thousands of individuals per acre, the nymphs begin to dig. Tiny claws, evolved for this single moment, carve upward through the earth. Small chimneys of mud rise from the ground, the architectural signature of cicadas about to be born into the upper world. For a creature that has lived in absolute darkness for 17 years, the first encounter with open air must be a sensation we can scarcely imagine. Consider the asymmetry of it. 17 years of pressing soil, 17 years of muffled silence, 17 years of cool, damp constancy, and then, in a single evening, the wind, the vast openness above. The dizzying scent of leaves and rain and rival cicadas already climbing. The nymphs do not waste time. They walk, sometimes only a few feet, to the nearest vertical surface, a tree trunk, a fence post, the side of a building, and they begin to climb. They climb with the steadiness of something that has waited its entire life for one specific task. And once they find their resting place, they pause. They grip the bark. They wait for the final transformation to begin. This pause, this last stillness, may be one of the most remarkable moments in the natural world. A creature on the threshold between 2 lives, 2 worlds, 2 versions of itself. The shell that has carried it through nearly 2 decades of darkness is about to crack open. And what emerges, what is about to emerge, has wings. Transformation itself unfolds slowly, in the quiet hours of night, when most of the forest is asleep, and the cicada has only the moon and the cool air for witnesses. A thin seam appears along the back of the nymphal shell, a fault line opening between the old life and the new. Through this seam, a pale, soft creature begins to push itself outward. Its body is the color of cream, almost translucent. Its wings, still folded and crumpled like wet tissue, hang behind it as it pulls free of its former self. For a time, the new cicada simply rests. It clings to the empty husk of the nymph, that ghostly armor that once held it together, and it waits while its body hardens, while its wings unfurl, while pigments slowly darken its shell into the deep blacks and oranges of its adult form. This process, from the first crack of the shell to the moment of full flight, takes several hours. And during those hours, the cicada is extraordinarily vulnerable. It cannot yet fly. It cannot defend itself. It is, in every sense, newly born into a world full of hungry mouths. But the species has anticipated even this. By emerging in numbers so vast, so simultaneous, that no predator could possibly eat them all, the cicadas employ a strategy biologists call predator satiation. Birds gorge themselves, raccoons feast, foxes and squirrels and even fish in nearby streams take what they can. And yet, after all that consumption, there are still cicadas left over. More than enough, in fact, to mate and lay the next generation of eggs that will burrow down and begin the 17-year count anew. There is a deep, quiet wisdom in this strategy. Not the wisdom of any single insect, of course, but the wisdom of a species, refined across millions of years of trial and survival. Be rare for long enough, and then suddenly, briefly, be everywhere. Overwhelm the world with your presence. Then disappear again into the soil. It is a rhythm older than any human civilization, a rhythm the forest knows by heart. Then, finally, comes the sound. If you have never stood within a forest during a periodical cicada emergence, it is difficult to convey the magnitude of what the ears encounter. The males begin to sing, each one vibrating a pair of specialized membranes called timboles on the sides of his abdomen, producing a piercing, pulsing call that can reach roughly 90 decibels at close range, comparable to the sound of a motorcycle or a power tool. But it is not one cicada calling, it is millions. The forest becomes, for a few brief weeks, one of the loudest natural environments on Earth, a continuous shimmering wall of sound that rises and falls like the breathing of the woods themselves. Each species, and even each brood, has its own distinct call. The males perch on branches and trunks, calling out across the canopy, while the females listen, judging, choosing. When a female is interested, she responds not with sound, but with a tiny flick of her wings, a soft click that the male can detect even amid the deafening chorus. The two find each other. They mate, and the female, having waited 17 years for this single act of creation, climbs to a slender twig and uses a specialized organ called an ovipositor to slice small openings into the bark, into which she deposits her eggs. She will lay several hundred over the course of her short life above ground. Then, within a few weeks of emerging, the adults begin to die. Their wings tatter, their songs fade. The forest floor becomes carpeted with their delicate, spent bodies, which decompose and return their nutrients to the very soil from which they came. And meanwhile, high in the branches, the eggs hatch. Tiny new nymphs, smaller than grains of rice, drop softly to the ground. They burrow downward into the cool, dark, patient earth. They find a root. They begin to feed. And there, in the quiet beneath the world, they begin once again to count. 1 year, 2 years, 3. The long sleep resumes. Sound itself is unlike anything else in the natural world. It begins as a low hum, a vibration felt almost before it is heard, and then it rises, layer upon layer, as more males join the chorus. Each male cicada produces this song through a pair of specialized organs called tymbals, located on the sides of his abdomen. These tymbals are thin, ribbed membranes that buckle inward when contracted by powerful muscles, then snap back into place, producing a rapid series of clicks. The clicks occur so quickly, hundreds of times per second, that they merge into a continuous tone. And because the cicada's abdomen is largely hollow, it functions like a resonating chamber, amplifying the sound to extraordinary volumes. A single male can produce a song approaching 100 decibels at close range, roughly the loudness of a chainsaw or a passing motorcycle. When thousands gather in the same grove of trees, the sound becomes something almost physical, a presence that fills the air and presses gently against the skin. Researchers have measured chorus volumes exceeding 90 decibels even from a distance, and within the densest emergences, the sound can disorient predators, confuse competing species, and saturate the forest entirely. Yet this overwhelming song serves a single ancient purpose. The males are calling for the females, who remain silent, listening, choosing among the singers. Each species of periodical cicada produces a slightly different song, a distinct rhythm and pitch that allows females to recognize their own kind even when multiple species emerge together. Some songs pulse in slow waves, others trill in rapid, high-pitched bursts, and still others build in long, drawn-out crescendos that rise and fall like the breathing of the forest itself. Across the canopy, the singers compete, advertise, and persuade, broadcasting their fitness through pure sonic devotion. And somewhere within that wall of sound, a female responds with a soft flick of her wings, a tiny clicking signal almost lost in the roar. It is the smallest of replies, and yet it carries the entire weight of the species' future. Once a female has chosen her mate, the next chapter of the cicada's brief life above ground begins in earnest. After mating, she searches the trees for the right kind of branch, slender, young, and still tender enough for her ovipositor, a knife-like blade at the tip of her abdomen to pierce its bark. With careful precision, she carves small slits along the branch, and into each slit she deposits a tiny cluster of eggs. A single female may lay between 400 and 600 eggs in her short adult life, distributing them across dozens of branches in delicate, methodical rows. These eggs are pale and slender, smaller than a grain of rice, and they rest within the wood as if cradled in a wooden nursery. Over the following weeks, the parents themselves begin to fade. Their wings tatter, their songs grow quieter, and one by one they fall from the canopy, returning their bodies to the soil that once held them in darkness. For a brief moment, the forest is carpeted with their remains, and ecologists have shown that this sudden influx of nutrients enriches the entire ecosystem. Small mammals grow fatter, birds raise larger broods. Even the trees themselves respond, drawing nitrogen from the decomposing cicadas in measurable amounts. The death of one generation becomes the gift that nourishes countless others. And yet, hidden within the branches above, the future quietly continues. After 6 to 10 weeks, the eggs hatch, and from each tiny opening emerges a creature so small it would be invisible to most eyes, a pale, ant-like nymph no larger than a sesame seed. These newborn nymphs do not linger. Driven by instinct as ancient as the species itself, they crawl to the edge of the branch and let themselves fall, drifting downward through the warm summer air until they reach the forest floor. There they pause for only a moment before beginning to dig, vanishing into the soil where they will remain, unseen and unheard, for the next 17 years. The cycle, impossibly long, has begun again. Consider for a moment the strangeness of this rhythm. 17 years is a span of time that feels almost alien when measured against the lives of most insects. A housefly completes its entire existence in under a month. A honeybee worker lives perhaps 6 weeks. Even the longest-lived insects, certain queens and beetles, rarely exceed a few years. And yet here, in the quiet forests of eastern North America, an insect counts the slow turning of nearly 2 decades before it ever sees the sun. Scientists have long wondered why. Why 17 years? Why 13 for the other periodical broods? Why not 10 or 20 or some shorter, simpler interval? The leading hypothesis, developed over decades of careful observation, points toward a remarkable strategy known as predator satiation, combined with the mathematical elegance of prime numbers. Both 17 and 13 are prime, meaning they cannot be evenly divided by any number except themselves and 1. This matters because many of the cicada's potential predators, birds, small mammals, parasitic wasps, also experience population cycles of their own, often in periods of 2, 3, 4, or 5 years. If cicadas emerged on a cycle that shared common factors with these predator cycles, the predators could synchronize with them, building up populations in anticipation of the feast. But because 17 and 13 are prime, they almost never align with predator cycles. The cicadas arrive in numbers so vast that even the hungriest predators cannot consume them all. Researchers have shown that in a single acre of forest, during peak emergence, the cicada biomass can exceed 3 million individuals, a density so overwhelming that birds simply eat their fill and stop, leaving the vast majority to mate undisturbed. It is survival through abundance, through arithmetic, through the sheer impossibility of being eaten, when there are simply too many of you. And so the strange number 17, once a mystery, reveals itself as a kind of ancient mathematical shield, sharpened over millions of years of evolution, written not in equations, but in the slow ticking of underground clocks. Predator satiation alone does not explain the full mystery. Scientists believe the origin of these long cycles may lie much further back, in the icy depths of the Pleistocene epoch, when great glaciers advanced and retreated across North America for hundreds of thousands of years. During those long, cold periods, summers were short and unreliable, and the warmth needed for cicadas to emerge, mate, and reproduce successfully may have arrived only once every many years. One leading theory holds that cicadas with longer, more conservative life cycles survived these climate fluctuations better than those with shorter cycles, because they were less likely to emerge during a summer too cold for survival. Over countless generations, the cycles lengthened, stabilized, and eventually locked in to the prime intervals we see today. Some researchers propose that the synchronization itself, the remarkable ability of an entire brood to emerge in the same year across vast geographic regions, evolved as a kind of biological insurance policy. By concentrating their numbers in a single, unmissable event, the cicadas overwhelmed not only their predators, but also the unpredictability of the climate. A few stragglers, emerging a year early or a year late, might be picked off entirely, while the main brood thrived. Over time, this selective pressure tightened the timing of emergence until it became the astonishing clockwork we observe today. There are still small mysteries within this larger one. Occasionally, a few cicadas of a brood will emerge 4 years early, a phenomenon scientists call straggling, and no one yet fully understands what triggers these exceptions. Some broods have gone extinct in living memory, lost to deforestation and habitat change. Others appear to be slowly shifting their ranges in response to a warming climate. The 17-year cicadas are not merely a curiosity. They are a living archive of deep evolutionary time, an insect calendar carved by ice ages and predators and prime numbers. And each emergence is a moment when that long, patient history rises briefly into the summer air, sings its ancient song, and then descends once more into the silence of the soil. There is another piece of the puzzle hidden in the soil itself, in the chemistry of the roots upon which these creatures depend for nearly 2 decades. The nymphs, buried in darkness, feed exclusively on xylem fluid, the thin, watery sap that trees pull upward from their roots toward their leaves. It is a remarkably poor diet, low in nutrients, low in calories, and yet it is the only food these young cicadas will ever know during their long underground tenancy. Because the nutrition is so sparse, growth is slow, and the nymphs must remain patient, molting only a handful of times across the entire span of their development. Researchers have long wondered whether the trees themselves play a quiet role in keeping time, whether seasonal changes in the chemistry of the xylem fluid serve as a kind of annual signal, a chemical calendar whispered through the roots. Studies have shown that the nymphs do indeed appear to track yearly fluctuations in sap composition, counting seasons not by sunlight, which they cannot see, but by the subtle shifting flavors of the tree above them. 17 times the leaves bloom, 17 times they fall, 17 times the tree draws different molecules through its vascular system, and somewhere in the small, dark mind of the cicada nymph, those rhythms are being counted, tallied, remembered. Consider the profound intimacy of this arrangement. The cicada does not merely live near the tree. It lives within the tree's slow pulse, drinking its measured breath, listening through chemistry to the turning of the years. Across millions of years of coevolution, these two organisms have woven their lives together in ways we are only beginning to understand. The tree feeds the cicada. The cicada, in turn, aerates the soil through its tunnels. And when at last it dies above ground, its body returns nutrients to the same earth from which it emerged. Nothing is wasted, nothing is rushed. And in this quiet exchange, beneath our feet, beneath our awareness, an ancient partnership continues, patient as stone, faithful as the seasons themselves. Yet, for all that we have learned about the chemistry and the counting, the deepest question remains, beautifully unanswered. How does the cicada nymph, alone in its small chamber of earth, actually know when 17 has been reached? What internal mechanism translates the slow accumulation of seasonal signals into the precise command, now this spring, emerge? Scientists have proposed several hypotheses, each illuminating a different facet of the mystery. One leading theory suggests that the cicadas carry an internal molecular clock, a biological counter built from cycles of gene expression, ticking forward each year as the tree's chemistry shifts. Another proposes that the cicadas measure their own slow growth, emerging only when a certain physical threshold has been crossed, a particular body size, a particular fat reserve, a particular hormonal cascade. It is possible, even likely, that both mechanisms work together, the calendar and the body conspiring to choose the moment of awakening. But we do not yet know for certain. The exact molecular pathways remain hidden, as if the cicada keeps its deepest secret folded somewhere inside its own quiet biology, refusing to surrender it easily. What we do know is that the synchronization is astonishingly precise. Within a given brood, the vast majority of nymphs emerge within a window of only a few weeks, after 17 years of waiting. 17 years of darkness ended on cue. 17 years of silence, broken in unison. Consider what this means. Somewhere beneath the soil, billions of small bodies are receiving the same signal at the same time, across forests that may stretch for hundreds of miles. Without sight of one another, without sound, without any visible means of communication, they rise together. It is one of the most remarkable feats of biological coordination ever documented, and we still do not fully understand how it works. Perhaps that is part of what makes the cicadas so haunting. They remind us that the natural world still holds genuine mysteries, ancient rhythms that have not yet yielded to our questions, slow secrets kept faithfully in the dark. And so for tonight, we leave the cicadas where we found them, some still buried, still counting, still patient in the dark, and some climbing slowly into the warm spring air after a journey we can scarcely imagine. There is something profoundly comforting about creatures who measure their lives in decades rather than days. They remind us that not all time is anxious, not all waiting is wasted. Somewhere beneath the forest floor, even at this very moment, a small pale creature is curled around a root, listening to the slow breath of a tree, marking another year off a calendar written in sap and seasons. Let your own breathing slow now, like the breath of that tree. Let your thoughts settle, like soft soil over the patient sleepers below. The forest does not hurry, the cicadas do not hurry, and tonight, neither do you. There is time enough for everything. There is time enough for rest. If tonight's journey brought you comfort, consider staying with us a little longer. Thank you for spending your night with Let's Learn While You Sleep. Subscribe and come back tomorrow night. We'll be here. Sleep well.